Hi, everyone. Welcome to the story behind the story. Today, we're talking with Laura Boneztky-Joseph. Welcome, Laura. Please tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
I'm a domestic abuse survivor, a sexual assault survivor. I'm an author. I have been providing spiritually based, integrative, holistic health since 2006, which kind of stemmed out of how do I heal the broken me? Because I grew up in a traditional healthcare system, worked in a traditional healthcare system, and I wasn't getting better. I was actually getting worse.
Yeah, such a
And
common
and
story.
right, and it's a very common story, right? Um, and it's actually quite refreshing that in the past 5 years, we're starting to see more acknowledgement that pills and just psychotherapy isn't gonna heal a chronic illness or an autoimmune disorder or, or any of the other roots that might be tied to unhealed or unresolved trauma. So it kind of started out as I was doing one thing. I think the catalyst was that really broke me up because I actually had a med spa at the time. And my ex was really hammering me. We call it, for those who are listening, the terms post-separation abuse, coercive control. There's a hashtag called Me Too Family Courts. Okay. It's what happens after you leave. Okay.
Yeah.
And he was like not paying child support. He was not paying, abiding by court orders, but he was stalking me. All right. He was actually even creating fake accounts. And he told the judge that I had all this money. I couldn't pay or share half the responsibility, but I donated $3,000 to a battered women's shelter. And I had to say, Your Honor, I didn't donate $3,000 as a monetary donation to a shelter. I donated a service to somebody. And when I did that raffle, it dawned on me because he was taking everything from me. He took my business, he took my kids, he took my life savings, he took my home that I built, everything, right?
Yeah.
And when that woman came into my door, she couldn't even make it to the front door. And she says, I don't know what I did to deserve this. And that was a light bulb moment. But what the real light bulb moment was, and I didn't discover this till a few years later, I didn't do it for her. May sound, and I know like maybe I did, but I did it because it was one thing he couldn't take away from me. He couldn't take away me making a difference in somebody else's life. The courts couldn't steal that from me. They can steal my children, they can steal my house, they can steal my savings, but they can't steal the impact I can make in somebody else's life. And that's actually was like a catalyst that really kind of started me shifting out of doing the med spa, closing that down, and starting this business.
Wow. Starting with a bang. So powerful, Laura. So powerful. And I relate really, really closely to your story. So it's big stuff. So this brings us to our first question, which is why did you write this amazing book, The Secrets to Healing?
I think it was twofold. One, I know when I was healing from trauma and abuse and the healthcare system, which is saying this is what you do to heal from trauma and abuse, you go
Mhm.
see a doctor, you get a pill, or you go to therapy,
Yeah.
right? And they weren't working for me. And I've always been very intuitive. I've always had this intuitive nudge. I mean, I watched my father diagnose cancer in patients when all the tests were negative. And I think over especially the last 10 years, the more I found more rooted, solid teachers that weren't whitewashing or weren't colonizing or weren't doing spiritual practices from a place of white supremacy. Okay. That I started really seeing a shift and I was getting off my meds. I wasn't needing certain things. I mean, I've had two surgeries that didn't happen as a result. I've had infections where I didn't need antibiotics because I applied these therapies. And I was like, geez, like this doesn't make sense, right? But then I started realizing, and again, having clients, I worked in a medical office, so having clients seeing the same things, but then also getting the same clients who would see Reiki practitioners and
Mm.
they'd be traumatized by the Reiki practitioner.
Ugh.
And a lot of Reiki practitioners or teachers aren't recognizing this, but again, it goes to the root systems.
Yeah.
If you're coming from a place of white supremacy, like the Reiki's taught us, Reiki can do no harm, you know, so you can do whatever. But I've watched people in circles actually violate boundaries and traumatize somebody,
Yeah.
okay, because they had a good intention, okay? So it's really, Reiki was set up to really remove toxins and basically decolonize, right? Because one of the founding tenets was it's ego destruction, right?
Yeah.
And it's returning yourself back to your core self, your authentic self of who you are. But it's been clouded. It's been like it got this big fog around us, right?
Yeah.
So when I started seeing, and especially it's been increasing in the past 5 years. I can't tell you, I think the icing on the cake was I was doing some market research and I just put in a Reiki group. So how do you describe Reiki? And I watched people that I know, that I love and I cherish and adore, who have been practicing Reiki for 10, 15, 20 years, not one say that it was Japanese. Not one. And that was a light bulb moment. So this book was really about using my story as like the backdrop, but how do we talk about alternative therapies and something that has worked in Japan? I mean, the Japanese military used it to reduce medical waste and increase healing outcomes. So if the country of Japan at one point, before, by the way, Western medicine came over during the peace treaty agreement in 1951 or 2, I believe,
Hmm.
after World War II, and told them they couldn't use alternative therapies anymore. So Reiki is still technically outlawed, but that's a topic for another day.
Wow.
And then how did Reiki get to be to this place where now we don't even recognize in anything that is energy healing? People just says chakras, oh, well, that's Reiki, or talking to Jesus and spiritual healing is Reiki. And we have gotten so convoluted as to what Reiki really is that
Mm.
now we just toss it around like a thing, but we're still not getting the results.
Yeah.
But we are getting the euphoria. I must say, we are getting the euphoria, because who doesn't want to get off? I mean, we have a glass of wine sometimes when we come home from work, right? We feel good, we feel relaxed. And I feel like Reiki has turned, and I'm speaking collectively now. I mean, I don't want people to feel like, well, I don't do that. Okay. And I would say if you're getting defensive, then maybe you need to do an ego check. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, so it's really addressing those core fronts, which are basically why is Reiki a good modality, but why is the way we're teaching it wrong, right? And it goes to the same root system as why chronic illness is the way it is. Why, so I go into, and I even have I have 9 case studies in the book to back up everything. I even bring in stats. I even have COVID stats in there. Not COVID stats is like how many people had COVID, but in relation to these 5 simple things. Because my hardest thing was I've been around my Japanese teachers now for, I think, 8 years.
Hmm.
And it's taken me a few years just being around them to understand how to differentiate,
Yeah.
because the biggest problem is the culture. So how do we take something from another culture that works and we've watched it work? I mean, like magic, like seriously, like magic, but to an American mindset, which is taught about how to pass a test without learning anything,
Mm.
how to get a piece of paper that says certificate or a degree on it, but it's not about the journey and it's not about whether or not you're actually learning anything. So it's a different mindset, and we're teaching our children at a very young age that mindset. So it's really a lot of unprogramming. So that kind of, I don't know if I kind of explained that.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of deprogramming. Very exciting. So tell us a little bit about you. You touched on this already, but I want to
Yeah.
hear from you. What did you personally, Laura, have to overcome in order to write this book and publish this book?
I think I'm still overcoming it.
Absolutely.
Um, I think the challenge was, how do I write my story without it being about my story?
Mm.
How do I write about some really difficult, hard truths about the root illnesses that are in our healthcare system, our family court system, just in general, our systems in the United States, especially the
Mm-hmm.
United States, because people from abroad are going to identify, while keeping in alignment with the teachings, with also honoring the lineage
Yeah.
and teachings and my teachers in a way that is empowering, insightful, that is going to, people can walk away and start doing things today. And like, I mean, triggers are a thing, right? How do I trigger somebody in a positive direction, not necessarily a setback? So I think that was probably the hardest. Somebody said to me, "Oh my God, your story." And they said they're finding how difficult it is to tell their story. I go, writing this book, me writing my story was the easiest piece. Being able to weave it into the larger scheme of things in a way I just described was immensely challenging.
Yeah.
Because how do you
So,
communicate, right? How do you communicate where somebody in the receiving end is going to see it the way you perceive it?
right. And that's brings me to my next question, which is who did you write this book for? And what do you want them to get out of it?
So I wrote the book for people like, I guess, me. So, because I guess I was thinking of like what I had to go through or what I see. So it's multifold. I wrote it for those that are survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence that feel like they're not being heard, they're not being seen, everything they're doing is not working. This is an affordable way, the book is an affordable way to get started on the things that I know that work until you can financially afford to actually maybe hire somebody who is trauma trained to help you in these processes. So that was one scope.
Mhm.
The second scope was to also give folks, because people say, "Oh, why don't you just focus on doing trauma?" I go, I can't, because 80% of the people that come to me for trauma work aren't coming to me for trauma. They're coming to me because they have chronic back pain that's not getting better, or they've got diverticulitis and the doctor wants to do surgery,
Yeah.
and they're giving them massive amounts of steroids and really toxic medications, and they're looking for ways to deal with that. Or the people that have like diabetes or breast cancer, for instance. And what we're finding is all of those roots of what I have noticed, at least in my practice, is rooted in unresolved trauma. And what I mean by that, it doesn't mean that you need psychotherapy or you need to relive your stories. It actually, like, now they actually have a term for it. We just said it was stored in your tissues. That's what we said for 20 years. Now they call it, it's in the somatics, it's in the vagus nerve. It's all these now fancy terms that are coming out now that we've been doing for like almost 20 years.
Yeah.
But it's how is it stored in the tissues? Because if you want to become whole, it's not just psychotherapy, which is the mental mind. It's not just going to your doctor, right? And getting something because you got back pain. And it's not going to your pastor or your spiritual counselor or your whoever your person is in the spiritual community for that care. It's if you've got back pain, how do you address it mentally, physically, and spiritually in order to become whole? And this is what this book kind of addresses. So it's kind of like a three-prong, and then the third one is for Reiki teachers and
Yeah.
practitioners, so they can become more trauma informed, and hopefully this will be a resource list for Reiki teachers to give to their students.
Beautiful. So, someone's read your book. How can they continue their journey with you beyond the book?
So I'm in the process, and they can do one-on-one sessions with me. I do them via Zoom or in person. I will
I
be
can just to interrupt. I
resuming.
can personally vouch for the efficacy of those. I have done one with Laura. It was amazing. I'm still getting great results from that 1 hour that we had together. So, highly
Oh, I'm
recommended
glad to hear that. I'm glad to
to
hear
do a
that.
Zoom session.
Um, Starting January, because I am moving into a new office this month too. So probably more by January, we will be offering more in-person events, classes, and so forth. And I'm trying to structure a program right now. It was originally called, so I don't want to, I'm going to say it, but just keep in mind that the name actually might change. But it was originally called um, the secret, the how to master and harness the secrets to your power, which kind of talks a lot about what's in this book, but it's trauma informed. It's basically addressing all those things that are in our blinders. And that's either going to be, that's probably going to be done on Zoom as either as an intro and as a 3-month coaching program and a 6-month coaching program.
Awesome.
And I'm also available, by the way, for interviews, podcasts, book launches, domestic violence shelters. So I'm starting to already schedule. I got one on Wednesday already. Somebody already messaged me in the past few days for an interview regarding this work.
Of course, you're going to get a lot of those. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Laura, so much for being here. You can connect with Laura. We will have her Linktree link in the description. We'll see you next time for the story behind the story.